So the struggle is real. You could be as candid as you want, and it could be about you. Somebody else doesn't matter. What's a situation in your professional life?
Hmm.
I'm sure it had effects with your personal life. It is, it always does. But where you've had to endure something or a story that somebody might even find relatable. It could be if you were a startup founder and you slept on the floor for 3 years while you coded, or, was it a situation where you had to eat ramen for however long until you hit this spot? Or maybe it's just you had to go to school at night to learn the profession that you wanted but weren't in, or you know what I mean? It could be whatever, something that you kinda had to, get your stars and stripes,
Oh,
if you
wow.
will, to do what you're doing.
I think that,
Or it might even be a current situation even.
well, I think every, I think there's a struggle every day.
Fair enough.
I think it's a pretty easy way to start.
No, there it's
You know,
yeah,
I think that there's legitimately a struggle every day,
yeah,
and it's not a bad thing. There's always, life is about challenge,
yeah,
right? Um, I think that the most challenging times of my career, there are a handful of them for sure.
okay,
Um, when I started with photography and I started traveling and working in the automotive world, was brutal. Was brutal. It was really kind of unpleasant. The hours were awful. The travel was, you'd go to these beautiful places. You'd kind of like look around and kind of go, okay, cool. Take the picture. I pack it all up, take it away, go next.
yeah, people
You
don't
know,
understand when you travel for certain things, especially work related, like, "Oh, did you go and do this and this and try
oh,
this food?" And you're like, "Didn't have the time."
I got sent to Hawaii to go work on Baywatch for 2 weeks,
Uh-huh,
and I remember people looking at me. It's like, so Baywatch is going to Hawaii for because they were moving out of Southern California. They got all these tax breaks to go to Hawaii,
okay,
and they take off to go to Hawaii. And the producer said, "We're taking Alex." I'm like, "That's great," and I'm excited. And there was like this little struggle in the office as to if I was going to get sent or not. I was like, "I don't give a shit. It's like send me or not. I don't care,"
yeah, yeah,
you know. And I knew I was probably not going to get to do anything fun, but I was like, I for fun threw my mask and my fins and in my bag, and I was like, I'm going to come just in case I get a minute.
yeah, yeah,
And I was busy pretty much the entire time.
yeah.
And I get back to the office and people are like, so, wow, was it awesome? Did you get to do anything? I'm like, yeah, I went snorkeling outside the hotel for 45 minutes at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was the only time I had. And I said the rest of the trip I was spent between looking at Diamond Head between two Jelco trailers.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it was getting the environment set up. It was they were up against it. I mean, we were having a good time, but it was stressful, right? It wasn't a pleasurable trip. But as far as like legitimate long-term struggle, the photography industry when I got into it in the 90s was a genuine struggle.
Okay.
Um, Getting in front of people, getting picked up as an assistant,
Yeah,
learning the trade,
yeah,
trying to transition into being a photographer and working in the automotive world, which is what I really wanted to do because I loved racing and I loved sheet metal. I just loved cars and bikes and pretty much anything that went fast and was interesting.
yeah.
Everything from cars to aircraft. The hours were absolutely obscene. It was 16, 18 hours a day, travel every day almost. And if it wasn't travel, it was still long hours and minimal amounts of sleep. I will never forget when I first started going out with my wife. I was working on a Cadillac
Okay.
catalog, and we hit the road, and I didn't get a day off for 34 days.
Were you making money doing this? That's why I wanted to ask, because I think that's the substance part of it. Like, I don't think you were breaking it in or
I
anything.
got I got paid very well
Okay.
for the time. I mean, now it'd be considered a slave wage, but it's like it proportionally it would have been you'd be making very good money.
Okay.
Was I getting compensated fairly at the time? Yeah, I was getting compensated fairly. I mean, it was like, let's be fair, we were maliceful with our billing
Okay.
because it was just like if I got to be up for that amount of time,
Yeah.
I am billing you from the moment the door closes the hotel room in the morning,
Yeah.
which is breakfast, lunch, and dinner,
Yeah.
to the time it closes at night.
Yeah.
I am on the clock,
Yeah.
which meant the first 10 hours were straight time. Anything after 10 was time and a half.
Okay.
Saturday was time and a half all day. Sunday was double time all day.
Okay.
Holidays were triple time.
Okay.
And it was just like, you just kept sending the bills,
Okay.
right? But the hours were really brutal.
Yeah.
And, you start thinking about working 18, 19, 20 hours a day for 34 days, you're pretty spent.
How
You're
yeah,
cooked.
4 that means you have 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Well, that's if you are able to get 4
4 to
hours.
6. The worst day I ever had on location, I was up for 53 hours.
Damn.
It was awful.
You beat my
It
record.
was awful.
When we did
Awful.
events, we would find ourselves awake for long periods of time. I was up for 42 hours once.
Yeah.
50.
It was like, I think it was 53.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I got up on a Monday morning. I didn't get to bed till like Wednesday evening. It was awful.
that's oh my
Or
god.
Wednesday afternoon. It was something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just like, I was so cooked. It was awful. We started in San Diego and finished in oh God, I can't remember what lone highway it was up in the high desert, but it was terrible. It was the location kept moving because we kept
How old
getting
were you
weather.
then? If you don't mind my asking.
Oh no, 26.
Okay.
26. And it was
Do you think
really,
you could pull 53 hours, 52 hours now?
I've done 30s. I've done a handful of 30s between then and now,
Damn.
you know.
30's hard.
I'll do it.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'll
it's just
do
like,
it.
well, the trick of it is, it's like, you don't get angry, you just do it.
That's true.
You
No,
know?
there is a certain mindset that you have to work with.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
You
yeah,
can't
you'll
get
go
cranky
batshit
about it.
crazy,
Yeah.
and then you might end up destroying everything that you're working for in the
Yep.
first place.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was taught by somebody who was ex-military.
Fair enough.
Best
Yeah.
way to say it.
Yeah.
He was an assistant camera, and he was a fair bit older than me, and Air Force Academy, and a wonderfully interesting guy, and just as brutal as the day was long. And it's just like, as soon as the sun went down and wrap was called, you get back to the hotel and go to the bar. He was your best fucking friend. But as soon as like you're on set, it was just like, I will never forget him. It was like, a lot of my work ethic comes from him. He would
Okay.
say, I don't want to see you walking to the truck with your hands empty. And I don't want to see you getting off the truck with your hands empty. Make sure you're fucking doing something in either direction.
Yeah.
I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
I don't care. Don't ever fuck off.
Yeah.
And then like at night we'd fuck off because we'd earn it.
Yeah. No, I
Right?
gotcha.
But essentially, I'll never forget being outside of Marble Canyon, Arizona, and it was late one night, and it was dark and cold and howling wind, and it was gorgeous, but it was brutal. And we're packing the truck up, and I'm getting a little cranky, and
Yeah.
he's just like, "Dude," he says, you got to just knock that shit off."
Yeah.
He says, "You just got to do it."
Yeah.
He says, let's just pack it up." He says, "We'll be back here soon enough." He
Yeah.
says, "Just you kind of got to be zen.
Yeah.
Let it happen."
You're giving me flashbacks. I'm having like a full house montage flashback in my mind right now, my own experience.
Oh, if you've done anything in this industry long enough, you've had a lot of these situations where you just kind of have to learn to deal with it.
Yeah.
And I learned to deal with it. And I I dealt with it for 2 seasons and said, I don't want to deal with it anymore.
Yeah.
It was almost 3. I did 2.5, almost 3 full seasons. And I was just like, I'm done with doing cars. It was just, I didn't like the hours and being away from home and how brutal it was. And honestly, it was really dangerous. I had a moment, I had 3 definable moments in one season where I almost lost my life and said, I'm not doing this anymore.
All right.
And it was like all Darwin Award stuff.
Yeah.
No 2 things were alike. And it was awful.
Okay.
And they were jaw dropping, and got home and was just kind of like, holy fucking shit.
Yeah.
So glad I'm still breathing,
Yeah.
And so I'm hanging it up. And my wife was like, then girlfriend was just like, good.
No.
And I sat on a beach for 2 weeks and tried to figure out what I was going to do next, and ran into a friend. I was sailing a lot at the time. I had a boat with a friend, that we were partnered on, and I was pulling it out of the water in Marina Del Rey and ran into another friend whom I had seen in a few years, who was a sailor, and said, he looked at me, he's like, "Dude, where you been?" And as I met him, he was an AE when I first met him, and this was back in the first met him in the late '80s,
And for those who don't know, an AE is?
an assistant editor.
Yep.
And the two of us had chewed a lot of fat together and a lot of earth on different shows, and we worked in the same facility.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen him in a number of years. And I'd run into him on the boat ramp in Marina Del Rey, and he just looked at me and he said, "Where have you been? What have you been doing?" And I told him. He was just like, "Sounds awful." He's like, he says, "What are you doing right now?" I'm like, "I don't know." I said, "I'm trying to figure out what I want to do." And because I bounced back and forth between post production and photography for about 2.5 or 3 years.
Yeah.
I was having fun doing it. I was young.
Yeah.
It's just like you could do it.
Yeah.
You just shift the gear. It's just like whatever. You just go.
Yeah.
It's like you get a phone call to go take pictures. Great. You go take pictures. You get a phone call to go be an assistant editor on something. Great. You go do it.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, it goes quiet. Nobody's returning your calls on one. You go do the other.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I get it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was able to. I was fortunate enough to have enough skill in both and be very proficient with both to be able to do both. And this buddy of mine said, "Look," he says, "I might have a job for you." And I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I've gotten enough money together." And he was a hustler. He still is. And he built a small facility, post-production facility in Santa Monica. And I was like, "Okay, cool." And I went and talked to him the next day. And he showed me the facility. And I'm like, it's like 5 Avids. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And Avid was very new at the time. I had seen the very first Avid back in the late '80s, one of the very first Avids,
Okay.
and it was really challenging. And I was still working on a nonlinear show, but it was all tape based. That's another long story. But Avid was becoming a very powerful tool at the time, and having 5 of them was like a big deal. And I'm like, wow, this is really serious. He's like, yeah. He's like, look, he says, I think you could do the job. He says, I know you have the technical head for it. You just have to learn how the equipment works. He says, look, I got another guy who's in here. I'll be going to be real honest with you. He says, I want to give you both an opportunity. You're going to cage match. And I'm like, okay, what does that entail?
Yeah.
So it was like I essentially got fight clubbed against another guy, and it was figure out how the place works,
Yeah.
do good, and whoever does the better job will get. I mean, I'll pay you both,
Yeah.
but whoever does the better job will get the full-time job, and I'll give you an AE gig on an upcoming show in the next 2 months.
Yeah.
And I got it.
There you go, baby.
And I spent a lot of time in the facility, and I was in that facility 8 o'clock in the morning and not home until 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, 5, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. And
For how many years?
I was there for 3.
Okay.
And then we had a client come through the door, brought another client in with them as a post supervisor, and she had a client who was a very colorful individual who was an honest to God and heavy hitting post production
Yeah.
professional and entrepreneur. And he owned a very big facility in Santa Monica. And he wasn't as heavily involved with it at the time, but it was kind of one of those things.
Right.
And she brings him in and he says, I really like working with you because I was doing his online. I was doing a little bit of everything. I gotten proficient enough that I was not just an assistant editor. I was teching the facility, I was administrating the facility, and I was doing online editing.
Yeah.
And I was very good at doing the Avid stuff. And I loved it. It was really fun. And in spite of the hours kind of sucking, you're sitting behind a keyboard. It's not awful. It's not easy,
Yeah.
but it wasn't awful.
Yeah.
Right. And I could fix it and work on it. So it made me very valuable. And he really liked that. And I got a random call one afternoon from nobody I'd ever heard of or known of. And he said, I got your name from, and I want to meet you. And I'm like, okay. And I go meet with him, and he pretty much offers me a job right on the spot
That's awesome.
to go work for a rental company.
Yeah.
And rental company was LA Digital, and they are long since gone, unfortunately. But they were a trailblazing company at the time. And I went to go work for them in operations, and they realized that I was gifted in not just operations, but I had genuine technical skill. And they're like, we need you out in the field.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sure, get some overtime,
Yeah.
have some fun. What a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
It was, but it wasn't. Let's be fair.
Yeah.
The hours were really rough,
Yeah.
really rough. Shit would break at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's like nowadays, it's like everybody's spoiled. It's just like, oh, it's broken. It's just like, let me remote in. There was
Yeah.
no remote in then. It was called,
Yeah.
you got to go fix it, you know? And it's just like, you'd get out there and you'd realize, oh, a card was burned out because an
Yeah.
Avid at the time was comprised of half a dozen different types of cards and different cables and mixers and just all this crazy shit. And it's just like, you never knew it was going to be broken. So the company wouldn't let you have cards in the car because it was, $100,000 worth of cards. Okay, so adversity. So I go into rentals
Yeah.
and got to have all your shit in your car. So I had a complete set of cables and whatever else I could drag around with me.
Yeah.
And I was on call was miserable. Hours were long.
Yeah.
You know, I when I say long, I think the longest week I had at the company 80 and 80 85-hour weeks were not uncommon,
Okay.
and they were brutal. And it was just not fun. And I did that. I was with the company for almost 5 years, and I was a technician slash engineer for a little over 3 years,
Okay.
and managed to get myself promoted. And as I started to get myself promoted, the on call started to finally change,
Yeah.
and I migrated into management. The hours changed, obviously, moving into management. You still had some longer hours, but they weren't nearly as brutal as being on site for 85 hours a week.
That's the struggle, baby.
Right.
That's
And
the
then,
struggle.
building the facilities for, doing going to work for the production company
Yeah.
and doing post. It was kind of, support was all over again, except it was just me.
Yeah.
So if the phone rang at 2 o'clock in the morning, it was just like, you really do have to answer it,
Yeah.
you know? And then you kind of get people trained. It's just like, okay, don't call me unless it's like an actual, like, you're not going to make delivery. Otherwise, put it in a night note because we're very regimented.
Yeah.
And head of post was really very well organized and made it very clear that everybody needs to have a break.
Yeah.
And in spite of my desire to make sure that everything was working all the time, and my wife trying not to throttle me because it was like, where the hell are you? It's like 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
He was like, if it's not critical, put it in a night note and we'll address it in the morning.
Yeah.
But it was still relatively long hours. So it did ultimately start to change a little bit. And it was like, to get to earn your stripes doing rentals and then building facilities and doing that sort of thing. It was just like a mutual friend of ours, when I was building the last facility that you knew of,
Yeah.
said, you got 90 days to build this monster. He said, you're going to need to embrace the suck. And I howled, and he could not have been more right.
Yeah.
And I really did have to embrace the suck on that. Because it was like I was there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I was frequently there at 12 o'clock at night. Yeah, for the first month or two. First week or two wasn't too bad, but it started to accelerate pretty aggressively, and then it
Yeah.
came time to turn the lights on because they had a very narrow time frame.
Yeah.
And the owner was really an amazing guy. He is just an extraordinary individual, and I just was not about to let him down.
Yeah.
And it was just like he said, this is what needs to happen, and this needs to be up, and we need to be going, and it needs to be by, it was like he gave me the green light on December 1st, and it had to be up March 1.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. It was crazy. But we did it, you know.
Yeah.
But it's the struggle is what it is.
Yeah.
You embrace the suck.
Yeah. I like that. Embrace the suck.
Embrace the suck. Don't get angry. Don't get even. Just deal with it.